All right, welcome to the latest DNA Fireside Chat. This episode is We're Going to Be Okay, the New Normal in 2020 Blockchain Fireside Chat with Jason Fishman and Brad Yasar. Jason is a growth marketing expert with over 10 years of experience leading marketing agency, ad network, and in-house brand marketing teams. Jason is an expert in digital channels, and his efforts have helped brands surpass industry performance benchmarks with both Fortune 500 companies and startups alike. Over the past 6 years, Jason has worked with over 350 brands, many of which are in the fintech vertical, and over 100 are focused on investor acquisition initiatives associated with 9 figures of funding. Jason's breadth of knowledge is showcased in a high volume of tech and marketing conferences, webinars, Forbes Agency Council, and with his Test Optimize Scale podcast.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here with you today, June 18th, 2020, an exciting time as we're seeing a lot of changes in the market, and honored to have Brad Yasar, one of the top names in cryptocurrency, dating back to 2012. I was a big fan of the D10E conferences Brad was hosting globally. It seemed like 2 or 3 a month all over the world. Everything Brad's done in the blockchain consortium, beyond enterprises, many of the top 100 tokens over the years, I think Brad's been a part of. So I couldn't think of a better guest to have here today to basically give the state of the union in this fireside chat on cryptocurrency and blockchain. Brad, welcome to the fireside chat, to the webinar here today.
Thank you for having me, Jason. I appreciate it. It's been really different not being able to travel and actually do these fireside chats and keynotes and have these conversations in person. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I've had the privilege of speaking at different conferences alongside Brad all over the world. The World Congress of Angel Investors Forum in Istanbul. We've been to all different spots together, Hong Kong. The last one was in Miami earlier this year in January. So I imagine the transition and not being able to do this on a more global basis has affected you and your conversations. And, basically want to have the discussion start touching on all of those different contrasts here in 2020 than in past years. But I know I only scratched the surface on your background. Do you want to give the audience just a bit more of a glimpse into everything that you've done in terms of your history around cryptocurrency and blockchain?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to bore people with what has happened because, this is a fireside chat about future and how we're going to do things differently. But, I've been an entrepreneur all my life, built a couple software companies, got introduced to Bitcoin in 2009, which changed my life in more than one way. Started Beyond Enterprises in 2012. Advised on dozens, if not 100 plus projects, both in the cryptocurrency blockchain space, as well as other technologies like AI, machine learning, esports, gaming. I mean, I've tried a couple different things, and this is where we are today. Is the culmination of that. Obviously. Tried to be a little more vocal in the blockchain space compared to before. Started Blockchain Investors Consortium to bring the active investors in the space together, and grew Beyond Enterprises to a 360 partnership model where we want to be the partner for projects that are either exploring blockchain technologies or building something in it in every way possible. So from development to marketing to sales, whatever their needs are, I feel like we have an incredibly strong team that can get them to those milestones. And since you're a part of it, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. We are always excited to hop into Beyond the marketing side. You guys definitely align yourself with the top projects. And just speaking to that, to working with these different groups and how it differs from past years. I know you're probably traveling 50 or more flights a year in past years, and relationships are a big thing. They're important. There's a saying, your net worth is your network. And I know you are closely tied to many major investors, exchanges, all different types of funds and organizations within the industry, within the landscape. How has this impacted your overall communication? Are you on a lot of Zoom calls? Have some groups gone silent a little bit? Can you speak a bit to, I guess, communication styles and overall project management in that capacity as you've seen it over the past few months?
Well, I mean, this whole thing with crypto and blockchain started with the newsletters and bulletin boards and cypherpunks. So I think it has changed, definitely. There have been a lot of different parties that have gone silent or are now focusing on different industries. But the core group is still communicating pretty much the same way. I mean, the getting together conferences, the in-person stuff was always frosting in the cake. That wasn't the backbone. The backbone has always been decentralization, people working remotely in a decentralized way. And so as far as, communication goes, we haven't changed much. The only thing missing is, of course, the gatherings that were so meaningful and supercharged the conversations, because like Satoshi Roundtable, which was the last event I've been to, I saw a bunch of friends that otherwise I don't see in person. But if I want to talk to them, obviously we have several different ways to reach each other, and those conversations have not necessarily ceased. Have they slowed down? Absolutely. I mean, these changes, socioeconomic changes that everyone is going through globally, are testing our ability to stay connected and still be able to work together. But I think in the blockchain community, because the foundation is decentralization and global remote connections, I think we're in a much advantageous place than the restaurant industry per se, where you can't go to restaurants, that's it, there's no business case there.
Sure. And I want to talk about March 2020, reflecting crypto markets, but first I want to hop right into the word that comes to mind for me when I think 2020, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, the halving. What's your experience with halvings? I mean, you've been through through the process with several at this point. And what do you think the impact's going to be in the coming months?
So I've been through all the halvings, and I think the impact is reducing with each iteration. And the reason why I say that is the first one obviously was something that none of us had ever experienced before. It was brand new, novel, had a considerable impact on the price of Bitcoin. Not immediately, but in the long tail of the aftermath of the halving. The second one had lesser of an impact, because now, obviously, the biggest impact of halving is on people who mine. If you're a miner and you're making money with providing the infrastructure for this blockchain to exist, you're directly tied into the payout of your activities as a business. So I think after the first one, a lot of the entities that were mining and supporting the blockchain realized that they need to have a game plan for the next event that's pretty much scheduled. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. So the second one had lesser of a drastic impact. But if you look at the overall price graph of Bitcoin, it's going up. It's getting more and more valuable in those two halvings. So fast forward to the third one, my personal expectation was, okay, it's going to be probably a lesser impact event because now we had two, and we know how to account for it in both the free market price of Bitcoin as well as the operations of the miners. That are the entities that are most affected. So I think the third one's effects kind of got hijacked a little bit by COVID. I mean, we were expecting certain movements in the market, and because the movements happened during a time where it was unprecedented in modern history, external factors impacted either the positive or the negative impact of it. So I think, again, as the new normal establishes and we come out of this global pandemic alarming situation, we're going to start seeing more of the impact of the halving. And it's going to probably be a slower process, but it's going to be there, because when you make something that's valued by many more scarce, regular economic theory would dictate that it becomes more valuable, not less valuable. So the trajectory of Bitcoin price charts have always supported that argument. Of course, we had a crypto winter after the January of 2018. Then we had some recovery, but now there were some institutional players, some internal forces in play that created big price movements up or down to benefit from them. And so we really haven't experienced the organic ramp up of Bitcoin, in my opinion, yet. So I'm waiting for it to happen again. If our world goes back to the new normal, this year, probably next year is gonna be where the price movements start happening. If it happens sooner, wonderful. Again, just for some color, I'm very bullish on Bitcoin. So I believe that the price is gonna keep appreciating. The Bitcoin is gonna keep appreciating, and the price is gonna keep going up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the perspective on it and painting the full picture. Say you're bullish, but also, conservative in terms of the timelines it's going to take to ramp into that. I know there was a movement of stimulus checks that were put right into Bitcoin, and we've seen a few things over the past few months. Yep. March 2020 up till today, there's been some fluctuations with BTC, obviously very strong, very favorable over the past 6 weeks or so. 8 weeks at that. What is your overall take? What is your overall explanation of what's occurred here and where we're all going together in terms of the market and overall levels, and reflecting more traditional financial markets at that too?
Well, if you look at the whole picture, the global picture, in the past decade or so, there has been the creation of alternative assets, whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum. These digital assets did not exist before, so you couldn't buy and sell them. Now you have obviously your classic alternative assets like gold, silver, and there are markets for that have been established and running for centuries, not decades, centuries. So those are more mature markets. And before, when there was a stock market crash, or when there was expected devaluation of a certain currency, the wealth of those that are affected would shift towards those assets. You know, if you think your currency is going to be worth 50% less, you you don't go and buy a house, because considering the price of the house stays the same, you're going to lose 50% of your intrinsic value in your investment just because it's denominated in your currency. But you go to gold, you go to silver, you go to these alternative assets, and that gives a certain level of protection because they don't move uh, uh, in parallel with your currency, or at least that's what you hope. Now, in the past 10 years, we have created these digital assets, and that are very easy to obtain and trade compared to compared to any real assets. So there has been a little bit of testing of those things. You know, there's a lot of appetite to uncorrelated assets in the investment world. Like if I have holdings in XYZ companies and they have these currency risks because they operate in those areas, it it it's smart to de-risk that, but by holding some gold or now holding some Bitcoin. So the larger investors have been very interested in crypto markets, but of course the fluctuations, the volatility is scaring off a lot of traditional investments, because when you're talking about big funds, a 2% move is in a year is a lot for them, not a 15% move in a day. So the appetite has been mixed. You know, some people have tried it, saw really good results, and have started dedicated departments, companies to it. The biggest name that comes to the mind is the Fidelity Group in US. I mean, they mine, they invest, they hold and speculate on crypto assets, and it's, I mean, it is a very established and traditional financial institution. Now, on the flip side, of course, the banks, some hedge funds do not like the asset, even the whole asset class yet, because they're not the ones moving the market. They're not the ones dictating what happens. They're not the ones doing the IPOs on it. So they are slower to get in. But I think if what we saw in 2019 continues and carries over, we're going to see more and more institutional, traditional investors come into the space and start taking long-term positions. So the difference between, someone buying 10,000 Bitcoin to speculate, and the difference between a hedge fund or a sovereign fund coming and buying 10,000 Bitcoin to hold it in their portfolio to the market is huge. One creates a lot of ripples, a lot of movement. So if you're a day trader, wonderful, you want those things. But if you're a long-term investor, it's scary. The other just increases the price, because now someone very resilient to market movements came and took out X amount of the market in their portfolio for long-term holding. So I think we're going to see more of the latter type of investors come in, even if it's in smaller chunks compared to their overall portfolio. I think that's the direction this is going to go. And I can only say it's going to see considerable growth, the crypto markets as a whole, because it has proven to be able to, I'm not saying it has been uncorrelated, but it has proven itself to be able to be uncorrelated from stock market movements. When the stock market in US crashed, Bitcoin didn't follow suit as much as the stock market. There was some correlation because people pulled their money out of everything into liquidity because of uncertainty, but short of that, the recovery was faster. So I think these newer alternative assets are starting to differentiate themselves enough in the eyes of the long-term institutional investors that there's going to be more of an appetite for it.
Sure. And some of my non-crypto friends have been asking, are people going to turn to, digital assets such as Bitcoin if there is any type of further recession or, financial collapse at that? Gold has obviously served a strong role there, throughout different periods where that's happened to an extent. There are indicators in the larger global economy of whether or not businesses are going to be able to persevere through the current conditions are uncertain. There are indicators on personal finances and different financial instruments that have been put in place to the extent of unemployment and different types of support towards businesses and delayed payments, that everything could catch up and have a grim effect on the global economy at a later time. I know there's a lot of great minds at work to prevent that from occurring, but in such an event, do you see, crypto coming to bat and even surpassing gold in terms of how people are allocating funds?
It depends. It depends. So why does gold work? Because one, it's a physical thing that people can hold on to, worst case scenario, because everything digital, everything that's in custody of another entity is at risk. You may not know this, but you don't technically own the money you have in the bank. It's not your money. If you had $100,000 in your bank account and today went to the bank and asked for your money, they wouldn't give it to you. They may give you a check, which is a representation, a promise that they're going to transfer that money over to whomever you assign it to. But in physical currency, they're not going to give you $100,000. They're going to say you should have called us. We don't have it in our reserves and all these things. So it's important to understand for any crypto asset, but let's talk about Bitcoin. To replace currency, it has to be usable in its native form. If I have to go from Bitcoin to something else to pay my rent, to pay my mortgage, to buy food, to clothe my children, then there's still that exchange risk or barrier where I can't hold all my net worth, all my value I created as a person in that currency. And if it fluctuates a lot, again, I'm creating a lot of risk on not being able to pay my bills. If I buy $5,000 worth of Bitcoin and I think, okay, this is going to cover my expenses next month, and next month it's worth 2,000, guess what? I go hungry because I can only pay my rent or my car payment or whatever my expenses are. Whereas if I know that the cryptocurrency I have is going to stay the same, hence all the stable coins from Tether to USDC to USDT to half a dozen or a dozen of them that are circulating right now, and they're uncorrelated from any fiat issue, yes, there will be a large group of people who would want to keep their net worth in a digital format so a government cannot collapse their currency that they're using, or it can't be confiscated by the bank or not delivered because they're short on reserves, and literally own that value in their own wallets that they control. No one else controls it. No one else, no one can garnish your Bitcoin wallet. It just can't happen. It's yours and you control it. So I think for a large portion of the population to switch over to crypto, one, we need to have more stable crypto assets that they can store value in, and two, we need wider adoption of direct to crypto payments and utilizations. If I can pay my utilities in crypto, guess what? Then I don't need US dollars. Same thing, if I can pay my mortgage with Bitcoin, then I don't need to have a bank account. And less reliant we become on sovereign currencies of the countries we live in, more chances of us going towards a crypto version of it and use that as everyday currency. And that hasn't happened yet. There's not enough endpoint adoption uh, to make everyone comfortable with it. But I think in the next 5 years, we're going to get there, because there are credit cards now that allow you to use crypto. There are ATM cards that immediately allow you to pay in the local currency, spending your crypto assets. There are very stable and proven stable coins that you can hold on to, knowing that it's not going to go up or down. And as those get more mature and have wider adoption, I think we're going to have more people divest from gold, divest from other types of alternative investments, and go to a digital version of it, so that maybe if they want appreciation or some exposure, they switch their stock market accounts to some of the top currencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, you name it. And then if they want something like a checking account, they put it in a stable currency, so that they know the value is going to be the same next month, the month after, the year after, and so on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the title of our fireside chat here, "We're all going to be okay," is a perfect sentiment to represent, I'd say, the past couple years, starting from the crypto winter conversation, then seeing lifts, then getting into the uncertainty type stages in 2020, and positive momentum over the past couple months. When I think about the industry and all the individuals I know, everyone we talk to when we go to different conferences, a lot of those individuals are working at blockchain tech startups. And a lot of the attention gets to Bitcoin, and rightfully so, looking at marketing caps, looking at the returns over the years it's shown investors, miners, everyone alike. But want to speak a bit about the actual blockchain tech startups, and beyond that, and more of the blue chip organizations behind some of the larger coins as well too. But do you see any type of upcoming alternative coin run? I've heard different perspectives on this recently. I know investors, let's say private investments, definitely died down at different points over the past couple years. Do you see that increasing? Will there be any type of crypto crowd sales coming back? I don't even want to mention the acronyms that are used to just describe these, to label these, as they had different types of connotations over the years. But what about the tech startups, the altcoins, private investments coming back, public sale type of activations? Will this be back in full force at some point?
So I like the title of our chat, because I'm an eternal optimist. And I believe through all trials and tribulations, if one is making an effort to learn and evolve into a better version of themselves, and a better version of the world they live in, they have the power to make that change. And that's why it really spoke to me, and I like it. Now, are the initial offerings using tokens and coins of 2016 and 17 coming back? Absolutely not. So that's a learning experience. We learned from it. We did it a certain way as an industry. For some projects it worked, for others it didn't work. And for some investors it was very profitable. Others it didn't work out again. And I don't think we're going to be back to that square. This is not the monopoly board. We're not going to go again and pass again. I think I look at it more from an evolutionary perspective, where Kickstarter is still around. People still do Kickstarter. Does Kickstarter act and work and do the same things as when they were formed a decade ago and some years? No. They changed the type of projects there have matured and evolved, but they're still around as one form of fundraising for certain type of projects. So I think the crowd sales are still going to be around in an evolved form. And there may be another wave of investors, retail investors, who come in and want to support them. What would trigger that? I don't know. So, the many things can happen and trigger another appetite, large global appetite for these tokens. Are tokenized securities or offerings going away? Absolutely not. I think uh, if not in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, a majority of the traditional markets are going to realize the value of NFTs, the value of security tokens, the value of tokenizing the legacy systems of accounting they have, and go in that route. Because if there is a more efficient, more cost-effective, better way to do things, even the most hard-headed, set in my way people eventually are going to adopt it. They may not be the leaders or the pioneers, but eventually they're going to see that, okay, I can reduce my operating expenses by X, so I'm going to use this technology, and it's mature enough, and it's provided by a partner that built my current technology stack, so I feel confident that it's going to. So I think crowd sales are going to stay. Are they going to be another rush? Definitely not this year, because a lot of wealth has been taken off the table by the lockdowns, the economic downturn, coronavirus scares globally, and people valuing liquidity the most. Right? If you're worried about not getting a job, if you're worried about not being able to pay the bills, you're not going to go buy a CryptoKitty, which in 2017 people had nice savings in the profits they made holding on to early cryptos, and they spent those on, I don't want to say frivolous, but optional things that they thought they would enjoy, or they thought they could get value from. So I don't think that's going to come back. I think there's probably going to be another wave once the economy recovers. That should take 2 to 3 years if we believe the economists globally and experts who study trickle up and trickle down economics of the stimulus, of the job losses and things like that. It looks like, the next 2 years are going to be very challenging for most of us. And those who overcome those challenges are going to find themselves in, hopefully, again, a period of somewhat prosperity. And once that happens, of course, there's going to be more funds available for investment. Now, on the institutional side, the investments are actually increasing into blockchain companies, into crypto assets. But those are not crowd sale kind of investments. Those are more block investments, index investments. I mean, they rather buy Bitcoin and the top 5 assets. That's going to the value is going to trickle down to other projects, but then go and individually do due diligence on the next crypto company and buy their tokens. So I think, again, I don't know when it's going to come back, but I would say no sooner than 2-3 years. We will probably see another comfortable wave of retail investors coming in. And of course, that's going to depend on the quality of the projects. If we have an eBay, a Google that comes out from the blockchain community, of course, that's going to draw more funding than the next pets.com on blockchain.
Sure. We'll be waiting for that to happen there. And when you're talking to friends and they're looking to reposition themselves within the industry, or maybe enter the industry here in 2020, always like to be sensitive towards the present. If somebody calls you today and says, "Hey, I'm trying to figure out what to do next. Where should I position my time? Are there certain type of projects that you direct them to? Are you a fan of some of the work that exchanges are doing and the way they're? Do you point more towards tech development, trading algorithms? Have the digital conferences been a supportive tool to be able to still build relationships and further things along? Where should the audience that's listening in today really focus and look for growth over the coming months, over the coming year?
The answer to that changes. So if I have projects looking for resources, for talent, and I believe in those projects, of course, I direct my friends and anyone that I come in contact with towards those projects. But in general, my rule of thumb getting involved with things, and I share this with everyone, is I recommend people get involved with things they understand and they have a competitive edge for. Let's say, you have a very unique experience in digital marketing. So if you were to be a stranger to blockchain and come to me and say, Brad, I have some time and money, I want to get involved, what should I do? Where can I jump in? I'd say, Jason, find something that you're really good at that the industry needs right now. Like, talk to people and see what they need. And if their needs match with what you have your competitive advantage in and what you're experienced in, marry the two. I had this happen a few times at conferences where people would come up to me and say, hey, I'm a broadcaster. I don't know anything about crypto, but I really want to get involved. What should I do? And I'd be like, broadcast, create a show, like help people create content, because that's very valuable. Positive messaging, positive content contributed to the ecosystem benefits everyone. I'd have people say, hey, I'm an actor, I want to get involved, what do I do? I'd be like, well, MC an event, do a small short series or a web series on crypto, ask questions, learn a little, and use your creativity at work. It's the same, it's the same for everyone. You need to find out what you enjoy doing, what you love doing, and then how that can help solve problems of others in the industry. I think that's a win-win kind of entry into the space. Whereas if I tell you, Jason, you should invest in something and then do this, that, if that's not in your wheelhouse, you're going to try and you're not going to see the results. And then the experience is not going to be a good experience for you. Right. So my experience is different from the next person because my knowledge base and competitive advantage is very different from someone else coming into the space. But I think playing to your strengths always works, whether it's a bear market, bull market, new industry, established industry. Like if I wanted to go into farming right now, I would pick a couple crops that I know I'm going to eat and consume, and I would grow those. Because then what I grow, I'm going to consume. I'm going to be the outspoken critic of my product, and then that's going to show in the work. It's the same thing with blockchain and cryptocurrencies.
Sure. And just to touch on those trading algorithms and other types of AI tools, are you seeing those working these days? Is it a good place to dedicate time?
Yes. I'm glad you brought it back to that. So I've been fascinated by obviously how much of our work our computers are able to do these days. And for those who don't know, I have a trading background. I in another lifetime traded Forex, so currencies and precious metals. And it was the stress of having markets open 24/7 that actually made me change my mind about being a Forex trader. Fast forward 20 years, now there are bots and scripts and even some much more sophisticated systems that can make split-second decisions and trade better than I did. Not that I'm saying I was the best trader around, but I did well. And, I was firmly following my TA signals and trends and watching out for fundamentals. And I thought I was doing a great job. Now, today, I find that we can program computers to do a better job than any human can. So yes, I think there is there has been a big quant movement in the past 10 years in traditional markets. I mean, big brokerages and hedge funds like Goldman Sachs and alike have hundreds of people on their quant side creating algorithms, creating tools to assist both traders and trade on their own. So I think it's a fascinating field, and there are some projects that are being done in the crypto space, because again, the market is much more volatile, moves faster than traditional markets, and there are opportunities there. Should you get involved with a trading bot? Unless you want to learn trading and understand what the bot is supposed to do, and then utilize it or put some funding behind it, I would say wait a couple years. I think I see retail, fully finished, airtight products probably getting ready in 2-3 years, because you want at least 12 months of live market data operations and hopefully profits that you can track before you invest in anything or start using any tool. And some projects are there with mixed results, some are not there. I think, as a friend, if you say, hey, can I play some money? I'd say wait another year. Let him mature, let him tweak out the kinks, let the 4th, 5th, 6th generation tools come online and get tested. And then, you can make up your mind, because it also depends how you want to consume that product. Are you going to be actively using it to support your trading activities, or do you want a fire and forget kind of product? The fire and forget type is obviously what we all want. We don't want to be in front of a computer watching the bot trade and interfere. We want more of a retirement account kind of approach where, we place some funds, the system does its job. At the end of the month or quarter, you get a report saying you made this much money, you smile, and you continue. I don't see any product right now that's there on the retail fire and forget side. There are some pretty interesting products on the enhancement of an day trader, active trader kind of side of things, but that's not for everyone. So wait 2-3 years. I think we're going to see some very, very interesting products and services.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a grounded, realistic outlook on that as well. I've come across a lot of groups that say they've cracked the code and been able to figure it out. You're going to be able to do swing trades, take positions based on systems that are being tested, millions of times. So I like the whole, 5th iteration, couple year out type of narrative around there.
I build financial products, and when you create a game, if the game glitches or crashes, you get complaints, bunch of angry gamers, and you give them some in-game items or currency, and they're happy. You fix the glitch. When you have a fintech product and it glitches or there's an issue, people lose real money. Now, you can do the same thing and give them real money and they'll be okay, but then how do you survive as a business if you constantly have to compensate your users for failure of your system. So I take, a fintech product much more seriously as far as recommending anything goes than, go try this new mobile game or, play Fortnite. If it crashes, you may lose ranking, but you're not going to lose your life savings.
Sure. So let's say someone does create an amazing product, an amazing piece of technology, here in 2020, we're just starting the second half of the year. Maybe they're looking for additional investors for their mining operation. Maybe it's a fund, maybe it's a trading algorithm, any type of NFT. What are the best ways to market? I mean, and let's have a discussion around it. I've heard attitudes, dating back to January of 2018 saying, oh, didn't that whole crypto thing crash? Or how am I supposed to get private investors? Or how am I supposed to do, my public sale? How do I get people in my, initial exchange offering? How do I effectively build an audience and drive them to a point of a conversion, whether that's a user sign up, an investor, even just an audience member on a social channel? What are the ways to do this effectively today, based on what you see?
So there are two ways to approach that question. I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna give you one answer. Then we're gonna probably talk about the other way of doing it. But the best way to start a business is get clients first before you build anything. If you have clients, you'll get investors. If you have investors, you'll have the funding. When I first started building software, the first time, I wasn't even an adult. I went to a few businesses and asked them, hey, would this be something you would use? Because I was going to create an office kind of product. And I asked them if I did this, before I wrote a single line of code, I just wanted to see if anyone would be interested in my stupid idea. So I just went and asked, and after I got a dozen hell yeah kind of enthusiastic responses, I didn't even try to get a letter of intent or anything like that. I just said, okay, if people are this excited about it, probably they'll buy it. And I built the product, I sold it. I didn't need investment, so it's a different scenario. I was just building it and then going around door to door, showing it to people and selling, but that was a different time. But if you know there's a market need, if you can pre-sell your product, and not pre-sell as in, you take money, but you sell the idea of using this new thing you're creating to your potential customers, then it's easy. If you build something and then try to figure out, how do I get more funding for this? How do I market this? That's where you and I come in, and we try to crack the code in reverse mode. So if you already have something and you need funding, the lowest hanging fruit is people who previously invested in that space, because the biggest gap between the entrepreneur and an investor is the knowledge gap. A lot of the times investors don't want to admit they don't understand something. So you're an investor, you're in a position of power, and you're talking to an entrepreneur who's a young guy, doesn't have money, doesn't have experience, and they're trying to explain to you their product, and you don't understand it. You don't say, hey, entrepreneur, I don't understand this. This is going over my head. Can you dumb it down? No, you say, this is not a good fit for my portfolio.
Sure.
It's human nature. It's hard to admit that, someone is trying to explain something to you and you have no clue what it is or what the value prop is. So I think if you took that gap away and you have a fintech product, you get you do some research online and get a list of fintech investors who invested in similar products or in that space. It's going to be a much easier conversation than trying to explain to a wealthy farmer what your fintech product does, because they don't have the reference points, they don't have the language down. It's just not their forte to talk about those topics. Or if you want to really expand and reach out to everyone, you need to have a universal message that a 5-year-old can understand. Now, I'll turn it over to you and ask, how does that turn into a good outreach, both for investors and or user acquisition?
Yeah, well, I'm very pleased to hear that you say build the audience, then go after the investors, because I hear the opposite so many times. If you build it, they will come is not necessarily the case. I like to build the community simultaneously, then showcase that to an investor. You know, we've been pitched by projects that have nothing going on and massive valuations behind them, where it's well documented that your audience is valuable, and you could build a whole model just around that itself. We obviously saw it done very successfully around some major raises a few years back. It was directly part of how you would evaluate a cryptocurrency company. So, being able to build that out, for me, everything starts with a marketing strategy. People call me every day and say, hey, I need, 1,000 users tomorrow, 100,000 next week, let's start. And that's really not the right approach to do anything. Coming from the traditional world of marketing, you could spend 6 months, 9 months just building a media buying strategy well before anything even goes live. So, I'm not saying that is the route, but you need to have a well-oiled machine built out, like a full roadmap of which audiences you're going after, what are their touch points online, the messaging that's going to run on each of those touch points, paid on the advertising side, and organic, leveraging content marketing, and all feeding into projections. So I like to look at impressions, clicks, conversions, how many times something's seen, how much traffic it's producing, meaning how many people are actually engaging with it and clicking through to the next page, the landing page, the site, what have you. And then the conversions, the conversion rate that's occurring there, where you can put actual numbers on the board. When I ask a group, how are you marketing this? And they say, hey, we're going to get covered by a couple big publishers and some influencers, and we're going to hit all our goals. And I ask about the math, and they have no clue on how that's going to occur. It's a major red flag. I mean, anyone could get lucky. I'm not saying, hey, it's not going to work, but statistically, it's not going to work. Meaning you got to be able to see what you're doing, what you're out to produce. The only way to measure anything is with numbers. I like the algorithm and the breakdown of that funnel, because it shows me where something's not working in the event that it's underperforming. And again, we have the numbers lined out, so I can tell what that is by the measurements. I can see what's overproducing and therefore scale that. I look for the pockets of performance, the actual audiences, day and time of week, location, both physical and geographical, any type of audience data I could get so I could replicate that. And scale is the word I always use. My whole philosophy is test, optimize, scale, but scale what's working. And it sounds fundamental, but it's a commonly overlooked step. It's more of that, checkers. How do I make the next jump move instead of a long-term game of chess and, intelligent strategy?
Yeah, luck is not a good business model. And build and they will come only works in the context of building an audience.
Sure. And, for us, when we're looking at an advertisement as an example, because advertisements are highly scalable, they're a paid form of marketing. So there's some guarantees around that in terms of at least visibility, if not clicks, and in some cases, even affiliate conversions. But when looking at that, 1% of the audience clicking through is massive. Meanwhile, 99% aren't doing anything. I mean, you take those statistics to any other type of conversation, and it's virtually not working. So when I hear people say, oh, my marketing's not working, or this doesn't work, that doesn't work, to me, it's just a matter of how to make it work, how to hit the actual milestones, how to make the right optimizations to get it there. And that's what separates marketers from people who are attempting to market their business. That's where the actual talent is showcased. Not when things are going well and the response is all there, but when things are managed to a point of effectiveness. And so that's what I look at in my conversations with blockchain groups. Whether it is around investor acquisition, user acquisition, B2B lead generation, whatever the KPI, whatever the key performance indicator is, that's where I like to chat. So, we're all going to be okay, absolutely, but with proper work, with the right due diligence, formulated into a strategy, activation using a scientific method of test optimizing and scaling towards what's working. And if that occurs, yeah, June of 2020 is a perfect time to do it. There's these events unfolding over the next few months, over the next couple of years, as you so craftily laid out. And therefore a lot of great things to focus on, a lot of great opportunities that can be looked at. And there's always a million excuses. There's always 99 out of 100 people who aren't going to care. They're not going to click. They're not going to engage. But finding the audiences that will is what makes all the difference.
Yeah, and you touched on something that I always echo. I think resilience is great and important, but you have to be adaptable. If you're resilient and set in your ways in these changing times, you're going to face bigger challenges than usual because things are changing around you and you're not able to adapt. Whereas if you're resilient and adaptable, then there's no reason why you shouldn't really see opportunities in these times and act on them and end up in a better place than where you started at the beginning of the year.
Absolutely. It goes back to human nature. And, I'm reading this book about humans hundreds of thousands of years ago and how we've adapted. And that's the key word is resiliency. When I speak to a startup, I'm looking for that grit of no matter what, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to hit these milestones and those pivots that occur to get it there. Some of the most successful people I've seen and have been at conferences with worldwide at this point, and they continue to have that presence in the scene, is because of that factor. They're continuing to measure what's working, what's not just from a marketing perspective. I look at marketing as the front line of performance for these businesses, but from an overall operations standpoint, and in terms of what they're going to do next, what project they're going to work on next. And that is the 2 degrees of difference that people point to in my eyes when I look at the room at a conference and who's doing things and who is continuing to talk about what they will be doing. Very nice. So wrapping up on the next couple minutes here, is there anything that you want to emphasize, Brad? Is there anything you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I think I want to reiterate that as cliche as this sounds, throughout our lives, change is the only constant. We change physically, we change mentally, we change spiritually as we have more experience and more years on this planet. So I think this change this year has been a huge shock to everyone globally, our social systems, economic systems, healthcare systems, political systems. It pretty much touched everything that we thought would be there forever. And now we see those changing. The workplace is changing. We've been working remotely from home since 2016. So for us, it's nothing new, the decentralized workforce. But a lot of companies are coming to realize that you can work from home and be more productive than being in an office with other people, your coworkers. So those who are adaptable to change, I think will find this very refreshing. Are these hard times? Absolutely. for the majority of the businesses, of the people in the world, these are very challenging times. But I'm optimistic that both in the blockchain space and other traditional industries, I mean, you and I, we love food, we love experiencing new cuisines. What happened to restaurant industry breaks my heart, but I know deep down inside, those that survive, that are resilient, are gonna come back stronger. And it's gonna be a different industry, but it's not gonna be worse than what it was before. So with that, I mean, I do wanna leave it with a very positive, optimistic tone that we're gonna be okay. Just be resilient and adapt to change, whatever that is. And be the change you wanna see. Like if you want positive change, it starts with you. If you're constantly negative, constantly worried, constantly unfocused on what you want instead of where you are, then it's very hard to change things in life, with or without COVID. Whereas if you try to embody the change you want to see, then it's a easier journey. And if every one of us did that, the world would be such a better place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to quote that out and put it in a meme. It was so well worded there. And I know we're a minute over here. Just want to add one final thing on top of that, building off what Brad's saying. And that is 10% of life is what happens. 90% is how we process it, the story, the narrative that we tell ourselves. And there is real opportunity right now. The reset button has been hit, and all companies that I speak with, big and small alike, are looking at survival tactics, looking at growth tactics, understanding that everything may change next week, next month. And because of that level ground, that situation has real chances to obtain new areas of market share, new types of positions that would not be available in the same type of levels a year back, 2 years back. So look at the positive here and build out your path. Want to thank everyone for being on as well too. I know there's a lot of webinars out there. Appreciate you joining our Fireside chat. Brad, amazing words today. Thanks again for being on. If someone wants to get hold of you, what is your preferred method of communication?
You can always email me at brad@beyondenterprises.com with a Z, or shoot me a Telegram message at Brad Yasar. I think those would be the quickest ways to get a hold of me. With phone calls, it's very disruptive, doesn't work that well. And so messaging, I think, or emails are the best medium right now.
And Brad is a wealth of knowledge and has been extremely modest on his abilities, network, overall recommendations he can make. I would take him up on that opportunity. I know I tried to as much as possible. And, we're available as well. digitalnicheagency.com. Can get hold of me directly through the site, as well as on LinkedIn or any social channel there, Jason Fishman. And make 2020 a big year for yourself. Take these recommendations and really position well in the market.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.